In this episode, we'll take a look at the Aputure LS 600X Pro and talk about what makes it pro. In late 2021, we took a look at the Aputure LS 600D Pro, and now we have the bicolor version of that. So I want to focus mainly on what makes this a professional level lighting instrument. I'll go ahead and list all of the specifications. Everything that they list, I found to be true. I don't think it's not just marketing speak. It actually does appear to be true. And we'll also put the photometrics that I measured here with my Seikonic C800. And we did all the measurements at 3 meters. Now this light is powerful enough, and also the 600D Pro, which we're using to light me right now with a big softbox. Both of those are powerful enough that it probably makes more sense to measure at 3 meters as opposed to 1 meter. At 1 meter, it would actually overload my photospectrometer, so that's why we measured it at 3 meters. We're talking about much bigger lights, much more output than a lot of the Aputure lights that we've seen before. And so let me just run through a couple of things. First of all, what is it that makes it pro? Is it the color quality? Is it much better than a lot of the other lights we've seen from Aputure and other manufacturers? And the answer is, it's very good. The spectral similarity index, and I'll go ahead and put all of this up on the screen here with all the metrics that you might want to look at. You can pause and look at it in detail. But the thing that impressed me the most is that in tungsten, 3200 Kelvin, the color quality on the SSI scale, the spectral similarity index scale, came out at 87. That is probably the highest score I have seen from an LED light in all of the time that I've been testing and reviewing lights. So it does very, very well on that front. And then when you switch it over to 5500 Kelvin, daylight, it got a score of 75 SSI. Now, that's not obviously as high as when you're in tungsten mode. If you're doing something color critical and you can block out all of the other light on your set, from my point of view, it definitely makes sense to use tungsten LED lighting whenever you can. But if you do need to mix with daylight, a score of 75 SSI is that's one of the higher scores I've seen as well. So definitely doing well on the color quality front. What about output? Is it the light output that makes this so extraordinary? And it does put out plenty of light. So for example, you can definitely light larger scenes. You can compete with daylight if you're working outdoors. It's got enough power, especially the 600D Pro. But even the 600X Pro is putting out quite a bit of light. For a bicolor light, though, you generally have to expect that it's going to put out about half the amount of light that the equivalent daylight-only model will do. In fact, what we found is that it puts out 7,610 lux at 3 meters, with the included hyperreflector, which is over half of what you get with the Aputure 600D. So they're doing something very interesting here, and it's just doing a good job in terms of efficiency, putting out a lot of light and also maintaining the color quality at the same time. So they're doing some good things there, but in and of itself, that isn't really what makes it pro. Build quality. Pretty solid metal build. It is a very solid overall build. So yeah, it's what you would expect for a professional grade lighting instrument. Is it extraordinary for something in its price range? No, it's just good. It's just what you would expect. You're paying nearly $2,000, and I think you're getting a very fair, high quality build. So none of those things in and of themselves make this a pro grade light. I think those are kind of baselines, what you would expect for a pro lighting instrument. But there are some things that are unique that really kind of bump it up into that range from my point of view. Number one is its water resistance. So one of the things they've done is they've waterproofed the fans. So they've sealed all of the joints there. Other sealed internal structures, obviously you don't want to drop it in water, but if it's raining outdoors, that helps. There are also rubber caps over all of the connectors. When they're not in use, you can keep those rubber caps in place, so that seals all of that off. So if you are working outdoors and you find yourself in inclement weather where you're starting to get some rain, you don't have to worry too much about this light. It's probably going to be just fine. Not something you can necessarily say for a lot of other lights. Power options, you have a variety of power options. Of course, there's AC mains from both in the United States at 120 volts and also 240 volts. So basically you could use it anywhere in the world. You just have to adapt the plug, but also you can run it on 2 Cine batteries if they have enough current to supply that. And on the control box, you have the 2 V-mount or gold mount plates for your Cine batteries, and this can also actually charge your batteries. So that's a really nice feature as well. So when you are on AC power, maybe you're working on one scene indoors, you've got access to AC power, you can get those batteries charged up. Then when you're doing that scene outdoors where it's not practical to run along electrical cable or stinger, and you'd rather just run it from batteries, then you can do that as well. So lots of good options there. I think probably the thing that really sets this apart as a professional level lighting instrument in 2022 is that it has a whole variety of remote control options, including a lot that you generally will only see in stage lighting or in higher end productions. So let me just run through some of those. So first of all, it does have the onboard radios, so you can use the Sidus Link system, which is the Aputure Bluetooth mesh I guess it's proprietary. They have a control app on both iOS and Android. If you work on the tablet, you get even more features. It integrates into their entire ecosystem of modern lights, and you have a lot of control. You've got tons of gels you can work with. Of course, you have the lighting effects, but you can actually also program this along with whatever other lights you have in your entire mesh network that are Aputure lights that are part of your whole setup. So you can do some really, really interesting things with that system in and of itself. It also now is capable of connecting with Lumen radio, so CRMX. So again, this is something you're more likely to see on high-end production sets and also perhaps in studio lighting and even stage lighting. So you've got another wireless option there. Now, there are also 2 wired Ethernet options. Again, these are probably more common in stage lighting, but you have ArtNet and SACN. So, which SACN just stands for Streaming Architecture of Control Network. So, 2 options where you can connect this via Ethernet and control it in your overall, basically Ethernet-based DMX system. So if you've got a DMX board in a larger stage setup or studio setup, this will integrate with that, and you can operate this with a bunch of other lights, whatever else you have already in your lighting grid or your overall setup. So that's definitely something you don't see on the lower end lights. And of course, you can also, via wired DMX, it has a 5-pin in and out, do DMX 512. And so if you've got an older wired DMX lighting grid, you can also use it in that scenario. So really pretty much every conceivable remote control option is built into this light out of the box. Now, one of the other things that Aputure has done in the last couple of years is they've gotten into making bicolor lights. And the tricky thing about that is that if you're doing a chip-on-board style light, a single-point light like this, it's a little bit tricky to do that because you have to mix the light at some point. The LEDs are not going to be right next to each other, and so you have to mix that, especially if you're going to use it as a hard light source. And they've done a pretty good job of doing that. In fact, I've found that for most hard lighting situations, this is going to work well. The only thing I found is that with the F10 barn doors, those are barn doors made by Aputure for their larger instruments, I did find just a tiny bit of fringing, so this kind of weird pattern that gets created when you're doing a really, really tight cut. But otherwise, it worked well. With the F10 Fresnel lens, the 10-inch Fresnel lens, it worked flawlessly. With the spotlight mount, which is their ellipsoidal, it also worked perfectly with that. You can cut beautifully, it focuses beautifully. So in those hard lighting situations, this is going to work well, which is really, again, took, I would imagine, a fair bit of engineering to pull that off with a light where you have a single point and you need to be able to mix the different colored LEDs together. As I mentioned before, the price comes in at $1,990. Again, we're talking about a professional level light. If you're a YouTuber, do you need something like this? If you've got the budget, by all means, but probably you don't need something like that. If you're going to be lighting larger scenes and you need to be able to punch a lot more light in, and you need the flexibility of being able to go all the way down to 2700 Kelvin, all the way up to 6500 Kelvin, this becomes a really powerful tool on that front. And then, of course, a nice feature as well is that they include a very nice transport case. It's basically a semi-hard nylon style case with rollers because it is a pretty heavy light. The Yoke can also adapt. It is compatible with baby pins, so if you're using a C-stand, you can put it on there. Also, you can use it in a baby pin receiver. So again, more options there. Again, this is going to be for more bigger sets where you've got more grip gear available to you and you're trying to light a more complex, bigger lighting design. So there's a look at the Aputure LS 600X Pro. I hope that was helpful for you. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave those down below. And if you've not already subscribed, make sure you do that. And we'll be sure to get you more great videos on how to improve your lighting and sound for video. Talk to you soon.